her name is Dawn. On the 23rd of March 2010 she was born. She's got half a heart, yes you heard that right. You're looking at Supergirl fighting with all her might. So stick around and you will hear the amazing story about my girl right here.
And welcome back to Arch Adventures. If you are new here, my name is Jade-Marie and I'm the mother to almost 9-year-old Dawn-louise. If you don't know already, Dawn-louise was born with a terminal and very fatal heart defect called Hypo-plastic left heart syndrome, otherwise known as HLHS, and in February it is Heart Month, and from the 7th to the 14th it is CHD Awareness Week. So I'm making a series of videos throughout February to really tell all of her story and her journey with it, and explain to you what makes our life a little bit different than other people's. Also, today is Wear Purple for CHD, so hence the change of clothes. So yeah, I hope that you're wearing purple. If you are, comment down below and let me know, and you can follow us on Instagram at Dawn-louise_HLHS, and then share with us your photos of you wearing purple and we'll put that in the story. So in today's video, I want to talk about the first 6 months of my daughter's life. It was definitely, especially for me, the hardest. Obviously it's not something she remembers, but for me it's something I'll never forget. This is a really hard defect to live with, whether you are the parent or the child. It's more painful for her because obviously she's the one going through it, but it's also really hard because I remember every single part of it, whereas she thankfully has been on medicine to help her forget, like having her chest tubes removed and things like that. So if you've watched any of our previous videos, you'll already know what surgery she's had, how we fed her and things like that. So I might bring those up again whilst talking about her first 6 months, but I won't go into as much detail this time. So Dawn-louise was born in March 2010. So I'm first going to focus on what happened in March. So the brief synopsis of what happened in March was I went into labour on the 22nd. I gave birth to her via emergency C-section on the 23rd. I first saw her on the 24th, and she had her first of 4 open heart surgeries, the Norwood, on the 29th of March. It wasn't until the 3rd of April that Dawn-louise woke up after having her open heart surgery. It was a really long time to wait to see your child open their eyes again and to breathe on their own, and it was just really hard because she was always so still, and babies aren't supposed to be still or quiet. They're supposed to be, you know, wriggling around and noisy and things. So it was quite surreal to just spend every day up till then just sat holding her hand. On the 7th of April, she was able to have her pacing wires removed. Pacing wires are placed after every heart surgery in case they go into cardiac arrest. This allows them to shock the heart from outside without having to go and get a defibrillator. The pacing wires are already inserted into the body. They just hook that up and it will then shock the heart and hopefully bring the child back. Thankfully Dawn-louise didn't have to use these. The pacing wires were removed. On the 8th of April she went down for another very lengthy procedure called a cardiac catheter. A cardiac catheter is a surgery, but it's more of a diagnostic surgery. It's not open heart, they're not changing anything, but it does still carry the same risks of bleeding, strokes, hemorrhages, and death, which is really hard because they have to have these to be able to have the heart surgery. So at least twice you would be putting your child forward to possibly not get them back. On the 9th of April, she was able to move out of the paediatric intensive care unit and down into the high care of the ward below. There is a cardiac ward at her hospital, and there are 4 different sections. There is the high care, which is the next step down from the paediatric intensive care unit. So it's where they still need a lot of care and a lot of machines and medicine, but they don't need to have as many nurses there, and they aren't in such a critical state anymore. Then there is the nursery for babies, which is where they don't need any machines, or they don't need as many. They might just like need oxygen and a monitor. And then there is another area like that, but for older children. And then there is a room on its own for a teenager. On the 10th of April, Dawn-louise started being sick again and they had to drop her oral feeds down to just 2 meals an hour. On the 11th of April, she was able to have her ECG wires removed. They were no longer concerned for her heart. Sadly, on the 14th of April, so not even a month post-open heart surgery, she was rushed back in for an emergency surgery on her bowel. During a routine echo to check how her heart was doing post-surgery, they thought they saw air coming out of her bowel, and they were really concerned that during the open heart surgery, they had cut a hole in it by accident, and then air was starting to build up. Thankfully, she went in for this surgery and they had a look at everything, and it turns out that she was completely fine. There was no hole, but she does have a scar because it was another surgery that they had to open her up to check. On the 15th of April, she was moved back down to the nursery again. On the 15th of April, she had to have a cannula fitted into her head. This is because the veins in her hands and feet had been so overused by cannulas and blood tests that all the veins were starting to become damaged and collapse, so they had no choice but to put a needle in her head instead, because she still had IV medications and antibiotics and things like that that they might have needed, which meant that she had to have her head shaved. On the 15th of April, I was able to give Dawn-louise her first bath, and it was so wonderful. It's not quite how you imagine giving your first ever baby a bath. She had a little plastic tub that wasn't even ours. It belonged to the hospital, and it was placed on the desk of the nurses station, which was sort of in between the high care area of the ward and the nursery area of the ward, so everybody could see my daughter getting bathed, and it was not quite how I imagined doing it, but it was still really lovely. She really loved water, she always has, and she just loved it. She just sat there and let me give her a bath, and she was so just at peace, and that was all I could really ask for back then, because you saw them cry so much and in so much pain that just seeing them happy for like a minute was perfect. On the 17th of April, I was able to put Dawn-louise in her first ever proper dress, and she looked so cute, and it's still one of my favourite photos even today. I waited so long to just be able to dress her, because obviously having surgeries and everything, all she could be in was, at the most, she could be in a nappy and a vest with a blanket, but most of the time it was just a nappy and a blanket. Sadly, on the 30th of April, her wound had started to open and weep, her chest wound from her open heart surgery, so she was put on antibiotics again. This led to her being sick quite a lot, and it was really hard to watch her suffer when we were meant to be sort of calming down again. 3rd of June, she went back down for another cardiac catheter. These are really hard. Even though the procedures aren't as big as open heart surgery, you are still holding your baby in the anaesthetist's office, having them administer medication to put her to sleep, and then your baby just goes floppy, and it's like they're not there anymore, and it is an awful feeling to just feel that weight suddenly go and their arms are drooping off to the side, and I've done that 11 times now, so it never gets any easier, unfortunately. I've just got better at coping with it. It's still really hard to watch, but I don't externalise it quite as much anymore. Sadly, just 3 days after my daughter had her cardiac catheter, I had to head home. See, unfortunately, I did have her when I was 16 years old, and she was born in March, so it wasn't the end of the school year yet, which meant that I had to leave her in hospital and travel to an hour away to take my exams, because I had to take them. I couldn't not get my GCSEs. I needed to provide for my daughter in the future. Really hard to make the decision to go back home, but I knew in the long run it was what was best. But for me, it was so extremely hard, because I knew that she was still struggling and I couldn't be with her, and it broke my heart to not be with her. But I had to do it, I had to. And one of the hardest parts was that when it actually came to me sitting the exam, because I had to go back to just like revise with the class first, my teacher thankfully came out to the home, so I wasn't actually in class, but I had my class teacher with me. The hardest part was that during my exams, I was trying so hard to focus, so hard to do well, and all I could think was, if she dies now, I'm not going to get a chance to say goodbye. I am so far away from her. And it was really hard, and like I'm really lucky and really thankful that nothing happened to her whilst I was away, because I would have never forgiven myself. But I know that if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to provide for her in the future. So I had to go do it, and I didn't do as well as I was predicted to, because honestly the whole time I was just like, what am I going to do if she dies? What am I going to do if she dies right now? You know, it's really hard to focus on things like things like that when your child is literally on death's door and you can't be there with them. Obviously she was in great care, she was with all the nurses and everything, and they all knew what was going on, and it was just really hard. You know, people might say, well, you shouldn't have had a child so young then, but I didn't plan to. I was told I couldn't have children, so that doesn't really work in my favour anyway. But it's not just me who feels like this. There are parents who have to go back to work while their children are in hospital because they need to pay the bills. And this is one of the hardest things, is that every single day is this massive juggling act between what you have to do and what you want to do and where you need to be and where you have to be. And I don't even know how I do it, to be honest. We have so much going on a day-to-day basis, and I can't even express how much we have to do, because I lose track of everything that we're doing each day, because I am doing so many things, whether it's staying on the phone for hours and hours, phoning different hospitals to try and get information and things like that, or it's phoning the school or getting calls from the school. There's just so much that goes on every single day, and I really feel for the families who can't get that time off work, especially the ones in America, because they don't have the NHS. They have to pay for their children's heart surgeries, and they're thousands upon thousands of pounds. They have no choice but to go to work. And I really feel for them, because in all honesty, Dawn-louise would not be here today if it wasn't for the NHS, because I would have never been able to afford her surgeries. It would have been impossible. So we are very fortunate that she was born in England, really. So I forgot to mention that whilst Dawn-louise was in hospital at first, I couldn't stay with her because you're not allowed to stay on the PICU ward, and you can't stay bedside when they're in the high care or the nursery either. So I was actually staying in a charity house that was just outside the hospital. I might do a video on that actually, because there are some things that happened to me personally to do with having Dawn-louise and having her so young and where we lived and everything. That's not so much about Dawn's journey, but had a really large impact on my life. So I might get onto that in another video. But basically, we lived in a little B&B type place run by a charity that was just outside the hospital. And they phoned me up, and it's really quite early in the morning. They asked me to come over straight away. So when I do, they tell me that something's changed with Dawn-louise and she needed her surgery sooner. They don't think that she's going to be able to wait. So on the 24th of June, she went down for another surgery, a pre-Glenn catheter. So it was another cardiac catheter. We're now on her third one. And unfortunately, she was down there from 10 AM to 8 PM, and there was a problem. So that's why it took so long. They found some complications. Thankfully, on the 29th, so just the next day, she was moved back down into the high care unit, and she was able to have her lines removed. Lines is a term used for medical wires that go inside the body. On the 30th of June, they again had to shave her head and fit a cannula into her head due to the veins becoming dangerous again. On the 1st of July, she had some blood work done. She came with her oxygen. She was moved over to the nursery. Then on the 2nd of July, they found a blood clot. Unfortunately, the blood clot was near the shunt they put in her first surgery, the BT shunt, and they had never experienced this before. So the doctors had to make a decision as to whether they were going to do another surgery, whether the BT shunt would need removing or resizing, and how to get rid of the blood clot for her. Because blood clots can cause failure to the heart as well as a stroke. This is something that Dawn-louise will face as a risk her whole life. She's on anticoagulants, which is a blood thinner. She takes aspirin at the moment, but she may have to be moved up to a stronger one in future. And that is to stop the blood from becoming too thick and forming clots, because she is at risk of heart failure and strokes because of it. And sadly, she was put back on oxygen. One of the real struggles over our whole journey is that it's a constant thing where you feel like you're taking 2 steps forward and then another one back, because within one day she was taken off oxygen and then put back on it. And that's just how it feels. It feels like you get close to coming home and then they take it away from you. You get close to being okay and you have another surgery. And it's just this constant battle as to, do we experience happiness right now, or is it about to be ripped away again? On the 14th of July, I really struggled that we were still in hospital. I really felt like the nurses were taking all of her firsts away from me. They weren't very conscious about the fact that I hadn't got to do things with my child yet. So like her first bottle, I didn't get to give it to them. I walked in one morning and they were trying her with a bottle, and it broke my heart because that should have been me. And I remember one day there was this nurse who really hated the fact that I was so young, and I had Dawn-louise in my arms and I just started to feed her. And it was going really well, and she was relaxed and she was looking at me, and we were having a lovely precious moment. And she comes over, doesn't say anything, takes my baby out of my arms and says, "You don't know what you're doing." And actually I had, and another nurse came over and was like, "Please give the baby back to the mother, she's actually doing really well." And it's so annoying because I've been through so much at this point, and I'm still stuck in hospital, and I was 16, and I don't condone that, you know. I would have never planned to have had a child at 16, but I am learning. Like, I learned how to feed her by an NG tube, which is like a miniature medical procedure where you have to check stomach acids and everything. If I can do all that, I can hold a bottle. Like, I'm okay. Just let me feed my baby, please. And it broke my heart because that is how it felt. It felt like everyone was constantly wanting to take her away from me, and it was really hard because the whole 6 months that we were in hospital, I had people staring at me and judging me every single day when I'm just trying to make memories of my daughter, who may very well pass away the next day. I just wanted to be able to bond with my daughter, and I really felt like there was this massive block just in the way of that every single time I tried. Sadly, later that same day on the 14th, Dawn-louise was diagnosed with an infection and she was put in isolation. On the 21st of July, she had to have another echocardiogram on her heart. She had many of these, but this was the first one that we got to take her off the ward to do, which was really funny because she hadn't seen outside of the ward, and we got to take her down there ourselves and put her in a pushchair. It was a hospital one because obviously we weren't expecting to do that. But it was just really funny to actually have her outside the hospital because it just felt so wrong where we'd never done it before. And then on the 22nd of July, she went in for another cardiac catheter. This one was 3 hours long. On the 25th, I got to give her a bath and try her in a bouncer for the first time, and she absolutely loved it. And I just remember seeing her little face light up, and it was absolutely magical. And I love that memory, and I love looking back on the video that we have of her as well. On the 28th of July, Dawn-louise was able to try solids for the first time. We had to have very tiny amounts because what we didn't want to do was risk her being sick, because then she'd also bring her medicines back up. But thankfully, she did quite well the first time. 30th of July, she got to try tummy time. Now, this was really scary because, one, she hadn't done it yet. Two, if you don't put them on their tummies, they could develop what's called flat head, which is where the head doesn't grow properly because it's not off the bed enough. So we did do it, and the first time she cried a little heart, bless her, and it was really hard to decide whether she was doing that out of fear or whether she was actually in pain, because obviously all her scars were on her chest. But obviously we were still in hospital and we had nurses around to help us. On the 1st of August, she was able to sit in a bamboo chair for the first time, and it was so lovely to see her sat up because she could not sit up unaided at this point. She didn't sit up unaided until she was 8 months old. She just caught it in time before it was classed as late. So it was really fun to have her sort of sat up and able to see the world from a new perspective. On the 3rd of August, we moved back to our local hospital. So we still couldn't go home, but this way she could be closer to home so her family could spend time with her. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to stay at the hospital with her, so I had to go back home to where I was living, which was an hour and a half away, and I had to walk that every single day, twice a day. So I am definitely not new to waking up early, going home late, and lots of walking. The only good thing about being so young is I had the energy for things like that. On the 28th of August was a really big day for us. It was the first time Dawn-louise was allowed to be in her pushchair, her actual own pushchair, and have a walk around the hospital grounds. And it was so weird. It was a little bit windy, but it was August, so it was quite nice and warm. But you could see like the confusion on her face as to what the hell was hitting her on the face. Because obviously she could feel the wind for the first time, and it was lovely. It was lovely to see her experience that for the first time.
You're trying to do it. You're fun, sweetheart.
And then on the 29th of August, we were allowed again to stroll around the hospital because they knew she was having another surgery soon, and they really wanted us to have that memory together. On the 1st of September, she had her left capopulmonary anastomosis surgery. They had to take a vein from her neck to put into her heart to help with the blood clot problem they found. And this took 8 hours. So it was quite a long one, but not one of her longest. Her longest one was 10.5 hours. On the 2nd of September, so the day after, her morphine was turned down and she was awake already. On the 3rd of September, we managed to start preparing to come home, and we had delivery of furniture pieces that we needed, like a table and things like that. And it was really exciting because it felt like we were getting closer and closer to it now. And I even bought her first bouncer that was just hers, and it was beautifully pink and it had little dangly bits on the bar and everything, and I was so excited to see her in it. On the 13th of September, it was my 17th birthday, and as a birthday present to me, the nurses allowed me 3 hours outside the hospital with Dawn-louise, and it was wonderful. We got to go to a little local park because there was no kids there, so it was fun. We didn't have to worry about infection. So yeah, we went there and I got to put her in the swing and we got to walk around a little bit, and it was just wonderful to be able to do that. Something so normal was like the biggest accomplishment for us, and we were just so excited to do it, and she was so happy, bless her. On the 17th of September, she was able to finish her first full bottle of 100ml milk, and that was a huge accomplishment for her, and I was so proud. On the 20th of September, we got another little day out and I got to take her to the beach for the first time, and it was so lovely. It's moments like that normal families or healthy families would take for granted because you could just go do it anyway, but we'd waited so long just to be outside, so to be able to tick off something like going to the beach when she's not actually discharged from hospital yet was just amazing. And then 5 days later, on the 25th of September, I got to take her to my favourite pond that I grew up around for the first time as well, which was so wonderful. 4th of October, the hospital had said that Dawn-louise would be able to go home. So we decided to go home and start setting up where we would be staying, and then unfortunately when we got back, they told us that she could not go home. And it felt like my heart had been torn into a million pieces because I'd waited so long to be able to take her home and to have them say in the morning, you're going home today, and then getting it all set up for her, having her cot and her teddies out and being told that she can't come home. It really hurt. It really hurt. We'd waited so long for the opportunity to take her home, and I really wish that they hadn't told us until like the minute we were able to actually walk out the door, because we spent a whole day getting excited about bringing her home, making her bed, put her bedding up, and she didn't get to come home, and it really broke me down, like, so much. The next day, on the 5th of October, Dawn-louise was able to come home, and it was just amazing. We were finally a proper family. We could finally have some time alone to like really bond and get our relationship going, and I got to go to sleep with her cot next to me, her next to me for the first time. I actually got to go to sleep watching my daughter, and I got to wake up watching my daughter, and that was just incredible. I'd waited so long just to close my eyes and her be the last thing I see, and it was incredible to finally get her home, and I was so thankful that that finally happened, because it really felt like it was never going to happen. Like, there's times when I would post on Facebook, like, I really don't think that she's going to come home for her first birthday. She's missed so much, I'd missed so much, and I felt like all her firsts were being taken away from me, and I was just so scared that we were never going to make it home, because you can't really form a close bond or a memory in a hospital. There is always somebody watching you, there is always machines going off, and there's always medicine that needs checking, and the nurses are coming around all the time. You don't get any time to just be with them. So the fact that we finally were able to do that was just, it was so amazing. And like, I didn't want to put her down. I just wanted to hold her constantly, because I waited so long to be able to be there with her. And I just remember I spent like a whole week just staring at her and not really accomplishing much, because I just wanted to watch her do her, you know? On the 7th of October, she was able to drink from a cup for the first time, and she had some like baby back currant juice in it, and she actually finished it, and it was incredible. And I was so excited because she was holding it and drinking it all by herself, and she wasn't sick. So it was an amazing accomplishment, and I was so excited. And I was so excited because like this was like something we waited again for so long for, and when it finally happened, you're like, yes. On the 9th of October, she pulled out her own G-tube and we had to go back to hospital to have a new one fitted. And it's like a good 30 minutes in a car, so it was like a long trip just to have another one fitted. And then on the 13th of October, just 8 days after getting her home, she was readmitted. And again, my world just felt like it was crashing down. Like we had 8 days of just calm and peace and being a family, and she was back in hospital again, and I couldn't stay with her. And this was the first time that I had to actually go home and lay next to an empty cot. And I just remember feeling like this is how it's going to feel if she dies. I'm going to be coming home and sleeping next to an empty cot full of her things. And it really hit home, like one day I may have to face that. But even right now, she's still alive and I just can't be with her. They won't let me stay. There was no room for me. And I remember I couldn't sleep next to her cot. It was, and it's not like I could pack it away. So I actually ended up asking if I could stay at my mum's, and I ended up sleeping on the couch there because I did not want to sleep next to an empty cot. She should have been there with me. I'd waited so long to get her home and we only got 8 days of it. And it really breaks you because she's not just my daughter, she's my first ever child. And I missed out on so many of the things you're supposed to experience with that. On the 18th of October, we were still in hospital and she pulled out her own G-tube again. So I got a photo of her without it, which was really cute. But she had these really red cheeks because the stickers that they used to hold it down had really affected her skin, and she got sort of like an eczema from it. The 27th of October, we were then back home, but we had to go back up to the hospital to have an x-ray done. And this was just a routine one. She would have them every now and then, just make sure that everything was okay. And then on the 31st of October, she got to celebrate her first ever Halloween. Now, I was never much for Halloween myself, but when you've missed out so much, you just want to experience and appreciate as many things as you can celebrate. And one of those for us was Halloween, and it was so much fun to be able to be there with her and do that. And we even had matching costumes, so it was super cheesy but super cute, and I love that memory, and I love looking back at all the photos. Okay, so that's a brief synopsis of the first 6 months of Dawn-louise's life and what it was like to live in hospital. If you have any more questions, you can put them below, and I'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the month answering all of the questions that are left, because obviously this has been a while for me now, so I may have forgotten things and missed them out, so I'll be covering those at the end of the month in case that has happened, and so that I can answer any questions that you might have. But thank you so much for watching. You subscribe and hit the bell so that you can keep up with these Heart Month videos. Happy CHD week to our fellow Heart families. I hope that you're wearing your red, blue and purple and have an awesome, healthy time this month. So yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Everybody gives you advice, yeah, on how to live your life, how to live your life. Don't you know that life is full of surprises? You better realize,